The Library Stalker. Sometimes the safety of a locked door is just an illusion. For one high school student, a routine afternoon in the library turned into a desperate game of silence when he realized he wasn't just hiding from a threat in the halls. The threat was already inside the room with them. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day that feels utterly unremarkable until it suddenly isn't. I was tucked away in the back corner of the school library, surrounded by the comforting, musty scent of old paper and the low hum of the overhead fluorescent lights. My only goal for the period was to finish a history paper, and the library was the only place quiet enough to actually focus. There were only about 6 other students, scattered among the Carrolls and the librarian, Mrs. Gable, who was busy shelving books near the front desk. It was peaceful, predictable, and completely normal. Then the intercom clicked on with a sharp, piercing static that made everyone in the room flinch. The principal's voice didn't sound like itself. It was tight, breathless, and stripped of its usual professional calm. Lock down. This is not a drill. Secure your areas immediately. Lock down. Mrs. Gable didn't even hesitate. She bolted for the heavy library doors and turned the deadbolt with a heavy thud that seemed to echo through the entire wing. As she began ushering us toward the safe zone, a windowless storage room behind her desk, the power to the entire building cut out. We were plunged into a darkness so thick I could practically feel it against my skin, and that's when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic clicking sound coming from the very back of the library, where the emergency exit was supposed to be locked. Why was the handle turning from the inside? The clicking sound grew faster, a frantic metallic rattling that signaled the door's mechanism was being forced. Then, a heavy mechanical clunk echoed through the cavernous room, and the emergency door swung open with a slow, agonizing groan. We were frozen in the center of the library, caught in that exposed no-man's land between the bookshelves and the storage room. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I could feel the pulse in my fingertips, and my breath came in shallow, jagged hitches that I struggled to quiet. Into the room now, Mrs. Gable whispered, her voice a ghostly thread. We scrambled into the storage room, our feet tangling with boxes of old periodicals and rolling book carts in the pitch black. She pulled the door shut just as the intruder's footsteps transitioned from the hard emergency exit floor to the thin industrial carpet of the library. It wasn't the sound of a student in sneakers. It was a heavy, rhythmic drag and step, like someone wearing boots with a weighted sole. There was no lock on this inner storage door, only a simple, cheap brass handle. We huddled together on the floor, the air in the small, cramped space growing thick and humid with our collective breath. One freshman boy next to me was shaking so violently that his windbreaker made a soft, rhythmic swish-swish sound against the wall, but he didn't make a sound. The silence outside was a vacuum, broken only by the deliberate movements of the person in the library. They began walking through the aisles. We heard the sound of books being swiped off the shelves. Not accidentally, but intentionally, one by one. Thump, thump, thump. Each book hitting the floor felt like a countdown. They were searching. I could hear the intruder breathing, a wet, labored sound that seemed to weave through the rows of bookshelves toward the librarian's desk. Suddenly, the library's main doors, the ones Mrs. Gable had locked, began to rattle. Someone was in the hallway, throwing their weight against the wood with such force, the frame groaned. We heard muffled, desperate shouting from the corridor, but the heavy glass and wood rendered the words unrecognizable. This was the terrifying reality. The person outside was trying to get in to save us, but the threat was already inside, standing just feet away from our hiding spot. The footsteps reached the circulation desk directly outside our door. I felt the vibration of the intruder leaning against the thin wooden wall of the storage room. Then, the handle of our door began to turn. It moved slowly, clockwise, until it hit the dead stop. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying to the darkness. When the door didn't open immediately, the person on the other side didn't scream or try to kick it in. Instead, they began to hum. It was a low, melodic nursery rhyme, sung in a cracked, off-key baritone that made the hair on my neck stand up. The humming lasted for what felt like an eternity, a slow-burn psychological torture that seemed to mock our silence. The intruder stayed there, their weight shifting against the door, humming that same repetitive tune over and over. The spell was broken by the sudden explosive sound of glass shattering at the library's front entrance. Then came the heavy, coordinated thunder of tactical boots and the blinding beams of high-powered flashlights cutting through the dark. "Police! Drop it! Hands in the air!" The humming stopped instantly, replaced by a brief, violent scuffle, and the sharp, metallic snick of handcuffs being ratcheted tight. When the police finally opened our storage room door, the light was so intense it felt like a physical blow. As they let us out, I saw him pinned against the carpet. It was a man in his late 40s, wearing a tattered janitor's uniform from a school 3 districts away. Spread out on the librarian's desk was a detailed floor plan of our school library, with red circles drawn around every storage room and crawl space. The investigation later revealed the man had gained access through a roof maintenance hatch early that morning and had been watching us from the vents until the lockdown gave him the cover of darkness. To this day, I can't sit in a quiet room without listening for the sound of someone humming in the shadows, and I never, ever sit with my back to a door.